You want to live a blessed, fulfilled life, and I want that for you. But did you know that one of the most powerful tools that you have to live that kind of life is just plain old simple consistency? Think about it. It is completely realistic that you could lose 15 to 30 pounds in just 4 months simply by consistently eating healthy food at a caloric deficit. Or like with music, you could go from having no musical ability whatsoever to being a halfway decent piano player just by consistently practicing 20 minutes a day. The same thing applies to your spiritual life. If you want to be blessed, you got to be consistent. We're going to talk about it as we dig into Psalm chapter 1 today on Puddle Road. Hey, as always, if this content is bringing value to your life, like, subscribe, comment, throw it around. These are the things that cause the YouTube algorithm to actually show it to more people. So let's try to do everything we can to get the word out. Thank you so much. So we are going to go through Psalm chapter 1 today. I want to read the whole Psalm to you first. My wife says she likes my reading voice, so let's do that. We're gonna be reading out of the NIV translation, Psalm chapter 1. It starts like this: Blessed is the one who does not walk in step with the wicked, or stand in the way that sinners take, or sit in the company of mockers, but whose delight is in the law of the Lord, and who meditates on his law day and night. That person is like a tree planted by streams of water, which yields its fruit in season, and whose leaf does not wither. Whatever they do prospers. Not so the wicked. They are like chaff that the wind blows away. Therefore, the wicked will not stand in the judgment, nor sinners in the assembly of the righteous. For the Lord watches over the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked leads to destruction. In this psalm, there is this comparison. There is a comparison between two kinds of plants: chaff, which, as you know, has no roots, it's dried up, it doesn't produce any fruit, it's not connected to anything, and so when the wind blows, it just gets blown away. And then there's a tree that is planted by streams of water. So this tree has roots that go down deep, and these roots have reached over and tapped into the constant flow of the stream. So there is this perpetual flow of nourishment coming into the tree. It's always being filled, it's always being fed, and because of that, it's always producing fruit. Plus, because it has roots deep into the ground, when the wind blows, unlike the chaff, this tree doesn't go anywhere, right? And this comparison is a metaphor. It's comparing two different people. Okay, so the chaff is comparing is representing one kind of person. This is a person who is not rooted in Jesus. Okay, they have no roots, which means they have no fruit. And because they're not rooted, when the wind blows, they get tossed. They fall into anger and bitterness and resentment and doubt, right? They might have some faith in Jesus, but they're not rooted, connected, consistently growing in Him. Okay, and then the tree planted by streams of water, as you can guess, represents somebody who not only believes in Christ, but who is connected in, consistently connected in, being fed, growing in Him. And because of that, They are consistently what verse 1 calls blessed. They're happy. They're fulfilled. They're finding purpose in the kingdom. And so when the wind blows against that person, they're going to feel it. Their leaves might get shredded a little bit. They might bend over toward the ground, but they're rooted in. And so they're not going anywhere. That's the comparison, right? And so it's pretty easy if you're a follower of Jesus to see which one you want to be. But then the question is, well, how did they get there? How did the chaff become the chaff and this vibrant, rooted, nourished, fruitful tree become the tree? Well, here's what happened. Okay. If you go back to verse 1, you can see the path that begins toward each direction. So the blessed one, the tree, is the person that does not do all the things in verse 1. The chaff, then, would be the person that does all the things in verse 1. So, what are the things? Let's take a look. It's really interesting as I was studying it out. There's a commentator named Adam Clark, and he says that the Hebrew uh, in this verse actually implies like a steps going downward. It's like various stages of descent. So when it says blessed is the one who does not walk in step with the wicked, Adam Clark says that um, the word wicked in Hebrew actually implies that this person isn't necessarily outwardly sinning. They're just uninterested. They're just not fully committed to God. And so there's this picture of walking, right? Walking in step with the wicked. There's a back and forth. Sometimes they're interested, sometimes they're not. It moves on to the next stage in the descent. Who doesn't walk in step with the wicked or stand in the way that sinners take. And Clark says that the word for sinners implies actually outward sin, okay? Outward sinning. And if you notice, the verb connected with this is standing, because sin really will hold you and keep you longer than you thought it would. It will keep you and stop you from growing. And so the chaff, the person on their way to becoming chaff, starts walking back and forth, uninterested, interested, in, out, in, out. Eventually that leads to outward sinning, which kind of puts a halt on their growth. And then the next part says, or sit in the company of mockers. And according to Clark, the word mockers in the original Hebrew implies outright hostility toward God. And the verb here is sitting, because this is what this person has become. This is now their nature and their character. Outright hostility toward God. Now, I haven't seen a lot of Christians make this descent. I have seen some, but I haven't seen a whole lot go from being apathetic to just outright hating, cursing, being hostile toward God. What I see most of the time as a pastor is I see the Christians who are not living that blessed, happy, fulfilled, victorious life are the ones who are always doing this. They're living in the back and forth, the walking in step with the wicked. One day they're totally in with Jesus. The next day, they're not. One day they're completely committed to discipleship and service. And then the next time you see them, they're just too busy. They're getting up and they're spending time in prayer and reading the word early in the morning, and then I'm getting kind of tired of this back and forth. And what happens is that just when those roots are starting to get down deep into the ground and starting to tap into the streams. And just as they are beginning to produce some fruit in their lives, the consistency of walking faithfully as a disciple of Jesus gets kind of boring. And they pull up those roots and move over here to the uninterested area of things. And that fruit never gets to emerge. Back and forth, back and forth. And victory is always just out of reach. But if you are going to be that tree who is consistently producing fruit, you're not being blown by the wind. You are, no matter what's going on, in the middle of the storms and wind and all that, you are still standing strong, producing fruit, living a vibrant, fruitful life. If you're going to be that person, you have to be consistent. You've got to be consistent in uh, studying the scriptures and prayer. I know that's an easy answer. It's the Sunday school answer, but you have to be. And that's something that has to be built into your life. It's not just going to happen automatically. There are certain things that you do every day. If you're not a psychopath, when you wake up, you have your coffee in the morning. I don't trust anybody who doesn't start their day with coffee, but there are certain things that are built into your life. There's a certain time every day you take a shower, there's a certain time you brush your teeth. Most things in our lives are built in before they happen. And the same thing applies when it comes to studying the word and spending time in prayer. You got to build it in because it's not going to happen on its own. And even when it gets boring, you've got to keep that consistency going. The same thing applies to church. I know with social media, it's really easy to just watch it from home, but the scriptures don't command us to watch other people going to church. It commands us to go to church, to gather. There's something powerful about that helps us to grow. There's something about being together with other people, studying together, worshiping together, serving one another that just causes us to grow. There's something about attending church regularly that builds into our hearts and our minds the idea that the things of the kingdom are important and they ought to be prioritized. And so, I know you have to miss once in a while. This isn't a legalistic thing. Sometimes you need to miss church, but here's a really good way to figure out if you ought to miss church on any given Sunday morning. Just ask yourself, if my kid had a really important game under the same circumstances, would I take them to their game? If it was cold and rainy outside, would I still take them to their basketball game? And if the answer is yes, then you should probably, if it's cold and rainy, still go to church. Or like if they have an early morning soccer game, say an 8:30 game on a Saturday morning, but you stayed up really late Friday night and you're exhausted, would you still set your alarm, drag your butt out of bed, slap those shin guards on that little heathen, and take them to their 8:30 game? If the answer is yes, then on Sunday morning, after you've stayed up way too late on Saturday night, it's still worth it to set the alarm, drag your butt out of bed, and make it a priority to attend your local church. Consistency matters when it comes to blessing and when it comes to growth. Another thing, and this might be the hardest, is developing consistency in obedience. Because the other things, spending time in the Word and in prayer and attending church regularly, those are the purpose of those is to uh, empower you to walk in obedience. And it might be a little overwhelming at first, but here's a good way to tackle it is just to find one thing in your life where you're not walking obediently to Christ. Whatever it is. Maybe it's your language. Maybe it's in the area of giving or the way you treat your spouse or, I don't know, integrity and honesty at work. Whatever it is. Pick one thing and really work on being consistently obedient in that area and watch the fruit that comes into your life through your obedience. And then once you get, rolling pretty smooth in that area, pick another, and then another, and then another. Make obedience, consistent obedience, a priority in your life. And you will be blown away by the amount of blessing and fruit that God pours out as a result. This is what I want for you. Right here. I want you to be a person that is like a tree planted by streams of water, yielding fruit in season, always yielding fruit, whose leaf does not wither, and whatever they do prospers. That is what I want for you. And the way for you to get there is this right here: to delight in the law of the Lord and to meditate on his law day and night, to live a life of consistency in your walk with Jesus. Consistency isn't flashy. It's not an overnight thing. It can even be a little boring. But I'll tell you, it does produce fruit, and it is totally worth it. So just know that I am praying for you, I'm rooting for you, and let's walk this consistency thing together. I'll see you next time on Puddle Road.